I was on a meeting the other day, and the yard guys showed up, and they're literally cutting the grass right outside my window. I'm like, sorry, guys.
The new world that we live in.
Indeed.
Looks like we still have some people joining, so we'll just give it another minute. Thanks for everyone who's here today. We're going to get started momentarily. Appreciate your time and your patience. All right, Chris, I think we still have some people coming in, but I think it's probably best we get started. What do you think?
I think it's great. Let's go.
All right. Hey, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you all so much for being here today. I'm really excited right now. This is the first PreSales Collective webinar, so we appreciate your time. We appreciate you being here. It means a lot. I'm James Kakis. I'm currently a solutions engineering leader at Salesforce. And I truly am honored to be hosting our first event with Chris White, demo doctor and the author of The 6 Habits of Highly Effective Solutions Engineers. Chris, thanks for being here today.
Hey, James, it's a pleasure, man. And congratulations. This is a big day for you guys. So awesome.
Yeah, it's a big day for all of us. I'm definitely excited. It's a big day. I personally am wearing a dress shirt for probably the 5th time in a month at this point. I may or may not be wearing shorts under my dress shirt as well. The beauties of working from home. Before we get started, let's take a couple minutes to introduce everyone to the PreSales Collective. Obviously, this being our first event, we want to make sure that we kick off what the PreSales Collective is. So really, today's normal is different than anything many of us or most of us have ever experienced. Like, these truly are unprecedented times, and unfortunately, a cause of anxiety, uncertainty, and unknown. In tough times, although hard, we want to make sure that we can find the bright light and make the best of any situation. And really, that's how we all emerge out of this stronger. And why I'm bringing this up is we do hope that the PreSales Collective can be a resource, a bright spot during all of this, and build more community and more awareness for our profession during this pandemic. Just briefly, there are a number of growing organizations and communities that are focused on sales around the world. Most of them cater to our AE, BDR counterparts. I still have asked this question time and time again, like, why is there not enough emphasis on the growth and enablement of pre-sales folks? Many times, even our own companies do not give us the enablement we need to be successful. And with the expansion of technology and the continual vital role that we as SEs and pre-sales folks play in sales and customer lifecycle processes, like, where is our enablement? Why do we sometimes get left out? And the question I always ask is, where is our seat at the table? And because of that, this is really where the global pre-sales community has started. And just want to briefly go over the mission and the vision. The mission is that there are 500,000 pre-sales professionals around the world, and there's no global organization that supports them. And we want to make sure that we change that. And I mean everyone who's on this call, everyone that's in a pre-sales role. Our mission is to elevate the role of pre-sales organizations worldwide. We will aim to provide pre-sales professionals resource, knowledge, network, and mentorship to develop long and impactful careers. And when I talk about our vision is to create a global community of pre-sales professionals who have passion, who care about what we do, a community for the community, and a place where anyone in the role can come and will be supported in their development. And that's really the key of what we're here to do. And the PreSales Collective really wants to be a vehicle to drive awareness, change, and growth to our profession. We want the PreSales Collective to be a community that everyone can be a part of, regardless if you have a local community in your city or not. We want to partner with pre-sales leaders, practitioners, products, and the community at large. The community is only as good as the effort that we collectively put into it, and more on that in today's session, but I want to get started into our presentation. So with that, I'd like to formally introduce Chris White, again, author of 6 Habits of Highly Effective Sales Engineers, founder of DemoDoctor.com. Chris, it's been a pleasure getting to know you over the past few months. I personally love the 6 Habits, and I think it's a great time to talk about how they apply to the world we live in. So thanks for being here today.
Well, and like I said, James, thank you again. I think what you guys are doing is awesome. This is, a super kickoff. I'm excited to be a part of it. And like you said, I think there's a lot to be learned, particularly right now, kind of going what we're through, what we're all going through. So just delighted to be here.
Great, thank you. And so before we get started, we want to take 2 questions in the audience. So if you're able to go to menti.com and fill in the code, we want to understand what roles are here today. Chris and I have some good content for today, but we want to make sure it's catered to our audience. So please go to menti.com and fill in the code. And we just have 2 quick questions we'd like to ask the audience before we get started.
Yeah, and it's great. Some of the responses are coming in. So actually, James, I'm not sure I even ever asked you, how long have you been a sales engineer?
Wow, that's a good question, Chris. I only get 1 good question per call to say that to. That's one of my SE roles. I've been in a pre-sales capacity for probably 6 or 7 years. I actually started in a professional services capacity that didn't have a pre-sales individual. So like many, I was called on to sales calls and kind of that proof of concept, competitive expert. And that's kind of where I was like, wow, this is really fun. This is a lot of fun being on the sales process. So I would say about 6, 7, 8 years from my end. How about yourself?
Okay. So, I took a similar path. I've been in the role for about 15 years. And before then I was actually a sales software engineer, if you can believe that. I'm going to date myself. I'm older than you. But I literally came out of college and was doing COBOL and DB2 and CICS for the few people that may know what that is. And then after about 15 years in a post-sales consulting role, got into pre-sales and similar. As soon as I found myself there, I knew there was no other role for me.
It's the best profession in the world. All right, well, I think we have enough of the audience who's filled this in. So let's move to the next question. Thank you.
Yeah, and by the way, it's great to see. So we're very heavy on the sales engineers, which is ideal. It's probably about what we expected, but that's great.
Yep. And then in one word, and we'll use a word cloud here, what do you want to get out of today's webinar? We want to make sure that these are actionable. You can walk away and say, wow, I really learned something I can apply to my day-to-day. I can apply this to my job. So please help us with this and then we'll get started.
Yeah, this is just so cool, right? This is the world that we live in now, but how cool is it to get information, growth, knowledge, collaboration, network, ideas, inspiration. It was awesome.
By the way, I really love the way Mentimeter works. As an SC, like the way this works and how we can see it live on the screen, this is really cool.
By the way, and just a demo tip, so one of the things that I'm doing in my demos now is I'll actually integrate a Mentimeter question for the people I'm demonstrating, even just to ask, are you familiar with our solution? Or, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you sort of rate your expertise, et cetera? So,
love it.
Man, this is fun stuff, right? I think I could just sit here and watch this for 10 minutes.
I know.
So
looks like we're almost getting to capacity.
Yeah.
This looks good.
And by the way, we'll make all these responses available, I think, somehow through the collective.
Yep. So we will get the recording and all of our notes out to the audience for sure.
Yeah.
This looks good, Chris. We got 125 plus. This is perfect. Let's get started. Let's start talking about the habits. I'm excited.
Great. So again, everybody, as James mentioned, I wrote a book and published last year called The 6 Habits of Highly Effective Sales Engineers. And in fact, I reached out to James, 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I said, I have this inspiration to talk about how do they apply in these historically strange times. And before I get into it, I'd actually like to just take a moment and give you sort of the brief story behind the 6 habits. As I mentioned a moment ago, I got into the role of sales engineer about 15 years ago. Before then, I was a consultant. In fact, my background is enterprise architecture. So I thought of myself as the technology person. And frankly, I thought I was going to be brilliant in this role because I could move a mouse and talk at the same time. And what I learned very, very quickly is that there's a lot more to being an effective sales engineer than just being the smart guy who's good in front of a room. And admittedly, I took a few, lumps early on. I kind of learned from the school of hard knocks, but I started to figure it out. And what I discovered is I'd sort of figure out one part of the job, but then I'd, hit another hurdle or another obstacle. And then I'd sort of figure that one out, and then I'd hit another hurdle. And so the habits really evolved from each one of those and from sort of that experience. And in fact, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Peter Cohan and his book, The Great Demo, but he talks about beginning with the end. So I'm just going to sort of jump right to the end. What are the 6 habits? Well, simply put, the habits are partner, probe, prepare, practice, perform, and perfect. Well, what does that all mean? Well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to step through each one, and I'm going to provide sort of the background and the context of each one, share a little bit about some of the core concepts within each one, and then talk about how they apply, I think, in today's world. So let's start with the first one. What I discovered very early was that I didn't understand the role. When I became a sales engineer, I still thought of myself as the technology guy, the technology expert. And I thought I was just the guy who was going to be invited in to provide information, answer technical questions. And in fact, I had an early conversation with one of the sales reps that I supported, and he was saying something about a sales process. He asked me about the sales process. And I said, sales process? What's that? Like, I didn't even know that there was a process to this thing. And what I finally discovered was that ultimately in this role, even though I had been and I was a technical expert in enterprise architecture, I was now in a sales role. And my primary role now was as a salesperson and ultimately to get the technical win. And when I came to peace with that, and by the way, a lot of us struggle with that early on. When I came to peace with that, it meant that I also had to recognize that the sales counterparts that I was working with and supporting, they were my teammates, and we were on the same team. Even though we tend to think differently in many cases, we're wired differently, we're on the same team and we have the same goal. And it really needs to be treated like a partnership. And hence, that became habit number 1. Sales is a team sport, and our sales counterparts are our partner. We have a common goal, which is to win the deal. We just play different roles. Our job is to get the technical win. Their job is ultimately to close the deal and get the revenue. If we're fully honest with ourselves, whose head is typically on the line from the CRO or the VP of sales on any given deal, or if a deal fails? It's, we're normally not on the, in the direct line of fire. This requires collaboration. It requires mutual respect. It requires a lot of give and take. One of the skills that we need to develop is the ability to effectively negotiate with our sales counterparts, because there are going to be a lot of things that we need to be able to negotiate on, but that requires an effective relationship. And one of the things I like to say to the people that I work with is neither one of us is always going to be right. So we need to find that balance. It's always a balancing act. And the other thought I'll leave with you on this habit is that it's best to set expectations up front. Don't try to sort out the process, right? Or sort some things out in the heat of a deal, right? That's the wrong time to sort of, fix the process, if you will. So that's the first habit. And James, we actually have just a quick, question for the audience to get some feedback specifically on this one. So my question for everyone, it looks like some people are already starting to answer the question, which is great, is how would you respond on a scale of 1 to 5? How would you respond to these questions, right? Or these statements? My sales counterpart frustrates me to no end. I frustrate my sales counterpart to no end. Or our working relationship is epic. And James, while the questions are coming in, I'm curious to hear from you. What are some of the experiences that you've had where this is concerned? Is it fair to say that you've had relationships that sort of, scale from 1 to 5?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it could depend on the company I was at, the team I supported, the segment that they were in. It really does depend. But, you know, in my personal opinion, and as we transition to kind of like how this applies now, I feel like this is more critical than ever because we're not, you know, especially those that are used to face-to-face interaction, we're not getting that right now. And
Yeah.
so approaching sales in a very sensitive time, where if you go in too salesy, it might not, you know, go over well. This is really, really important. It's also really hard to do as well.
Yeah. No, you're spot on, and that, I think that bleeds into, you know, kind of what we're talking about in terms of how does this apply to today. And here's the reality, and you know, we could spend, it's interesting, we could spend a 1-hour webinar, you know, conversation, frankly, on any one of the 6 habits. One of the things that I love to talk about is just the fact that we are just wired so differently. We just are, you know, and we can't help ourselves because fundamentally we're engineers, you know, to our core. And likewise, they're sort of wired the way they are, right? And so we're sort of, you know, sort of structured to have friction sort of right out of the gate. And I think that's why it works. So anyway, well, we got at least 65 responses. So that's I think at least a good poll. You know, the fact that we have, you know, we scaled 3.4 on working relationships as epic, that's fabulous. I love the fact that we think we frustrate them a little less than they frustrate us. And so we can sort of continue forward. And James, this is what you were saying. You know, I think more than ever before, we need to come together as a team. They're going through this just like we are, right? And I think in some cases they may be more scared than we are, right? So I think this is an opportunity for us to reach out. In fact, I know we talked about pausing the screen share so you and I could just dialogue for a moment. You know, from your experience and from what you've seen over the past month or so, do you see sales engineers and their sales counterparts coming together? And are you seeing sort of this increased teamwork happening?
Oh, ad-lib question to my end. I like it. I think from my perspective, I'm seeing it all over the board. You have experienced salespeople who not necessarily have ever encountered this situation, but they understand the sensitivity around sales right now. So they're approaching things a little bit differently. On the flip side, you know, there's also quotas. There are quotas and monthly, quarterly that people have to meet, and that's causing a little bit of angst again. So it's kind of all over the place. And I want to actually ask you a question because we've gotten a lot of people have asked a very similar question, which makes me happy. And on that note, I apologize. If you have questions, I put it in the chat, put it in the Q&A. We want to make this interactive. What are ways that you suggest growing the partnership with our AE counterparts? And to take it a step further, there's a lot of teams that aren't in like a ratio. They're in a pull model, right? So you might not be 1-to-1, 1-to-2, 1-to-3. You might support a larger group. What are your thoughts on that before we move on to the next one?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to take those in reverse order because I love the pull question. I get a lot, right? Frankly, if you get, what do we typically get? We typically get a request to engage with a customer, to do a demo. If this is someone that you haven't worked with a lot before, my recommendation is just say, hey, can we just get on a call for 30 minutes, you know, the week before the meeting or even the day before the meeting, and just, you know, almost treat that conversation like a discovery a discovery conversation with your sales counterpart, right? And, you know, help me understand, how do you like to perform? What do you look for in a sales engineer? What do you want? What do you most want to see me do when it's my turn to present, right? Are there certain things that you're looking for, right? And just so I understand, how do you like to operate, right? Do you have a lot of slides? Do you not do slides, right? So I just think anything we can do to clarify expectations up front, and you know, the mistake that we make is, and by the way, this is the mistake that I made early on. We get a request, we just sort of jump in, right? Kind of feet first, and then find out before, you know, after it's too late that, wow, they operate differently than I do, right? So, and sort of taking the first question, it's similar, folks, proactive communication, right? At the end of the day, what do they care about the most? They want to make their number, right? That's what they care about the most, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's their job, right? We need to make sure that we understand, right? How can we best help you achieve what you're trying to achieve? So that's the way I respond to that, James.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Understanding their motivations is critical. It's important for sure.
Yeah.
Great.
So was there another question that you wanted to address now, or should
we got a lot
on?
of good questions right now. I'll do my best to work them in as we move forward.
Okay. Sure. So we've sort of established habit one, and frankly, James, I see that as the foundation, right? Habit one, the partnership, really is the foundation that enables the other habits, really to be fully effective. For me, once I understood and started sort of getting my head around what it meant to be in sales, frankly, I think I started to develop a bit of an ego. And I kind of felt like, you know what, like I'm figuring this out. And I started saying and I supported 4 or 5 different salespeople. I would say, you know what, if you got a customer call or you need a demo, you just put it on my account or put it on my calendar and I'll show up, and I'm smart enough and I can handle it. Well, guess what happened? I started going into some meetings looking a little bit like this guy, right? I was walking in blindfolded, right? Partially ignorant, partially naive, and partially arrogant, that I could just walk in and handle any situation, handle any question. But here's what I discovered. I discovered that I started walking into some meetings and some technical presentations and some customer, presentations and demos unprepared. Sometimes I was unprepared because my sales counterpart didn't give me the right information or enough information. Sometimes it was the customer that didn't give us the right information. Other times it was flat out my fault for not asking the right questions up front. So what evolved was what I refer to as simply technical discovery. I realized that, and it got to the point that before I'm going, particularly if it's a big strategic account, a big strategic presentation and demonstration, I had to do my own technical discovery, right? Habit 2, to probe into the inquiry from the customer, the inquiry from my sales counterpart, into what was it that they're actually looking to accomplish, right? And here's the thing. I believe technical discovery is different from sales discovery. The salespeople don't ask the same questions we ask, and they don't interpret it in the same way that we do. When we hear something, we're trying to interpret it as, what do we need it to actually say, show, and do to get the technical win? The opposite, as we just looked at a moment ago, is going in blind. The reality is that every customer, every situation, every opportunity is unique and different. So we need to do technical discovery. When we do, we need to ask good questions. One of the mistakes that we make is that we get into discovery and we ask a couple questions and then we quickly move into selling or quickly move into solving, right? We also need to do our due diligence. Don't go in to do discovery and ask the same questions that have already been asked, right? So ask good questions, be efficient with their time, listen and take good notes. Now is not the time to sell. Now is not the time to solve. We'll get that chance when we, go in to give a demo or presentation or online. But technical discovery for me became habit number 2 because I simply couldn't go into a meeting without any preparation. Now, James, I know again, we want to talk about how does this apply today? I believe more so than ever before, we need to focus on the customer. Now, I will make this one caveat, I said this in a conversation last week. The reality is business in some cases is moving faster than it's ever moved. And there's a lot of urgency, right, with some organizations. We may not get the opportunity to do discovery up front in certain circumstances right now. And that's just the way of life right now. But when we do, and if we do, we need to really focus on the customer. What are their needs now? how have they changed as a result of the pandemic and all the things that are happening, right? And they really need to believe, customers really need to believe that this discovery process is in their best interest, right? And we need to make it very, very clear. So again, James, I'll just pause the slides so you and I can just sort of have a brief discussion.
I got one pressing question for you, because I feel like this is something that happens a lot, is that we don't get an opportunity to do disco ahead of time. Sometimes we get asked to jump on a customer call, jump on a meeting, and there's no disco. And so you're kind of walking a little bit blind. Maybe you check notes. So what do you suggest people do if they get thrown on a demo and they haven't been able to do their own discovery?
Yeah, and if I may, for everybody listening at home, I hear this all the time. In fact, I think I hear this every time I cover this habit. And my answer is almost always the same. It's a two-part answer. First of all, and by the way, this happened to me as well. I tell the sales counterpart that I'm working with, again, it comes back to habit number one, the partnership. I'm gonna say, look, without having had the opportunity to do any discovery, I'm only as good as the information that you've given me and the information that the customer's given you, okay? So I will do my best with sort of, if I'm giving a demo, I'll do my best with a canned demo. I'll do my best to sort of, pivot and turn if I see the opportunity. That's number one. Number two, I'm probably gonna tell him or her, actually, if we're gonna go in and do this meeting, I'd actually like to do a little bit of discovery up front. So before you turn to me and say, Chris, can you show the solution? It would be better if you turn to me and say, Chris, I know you might have a few questions before you show the solution, right? Like just that tiny little conversation can make an enormous difference in front of the customer, right? And how long did it take to have that conversation? Now, by the way, I realize there are some sales counterparts that may say, no, I don't want you to ask any questions, just show the demo. Again, at the end of the day, it's their account and their opportunity, and they have from my vantage point, they have the final say. And if they sort of dictate that, then I'm gonna say, okay, I'm only as good as I can be in that case. So again, does that make sense, James?
Yeah, that's perfect. I think that's a great question or a great answer to that question.
Yeah. Any other questions on that point, or shall we?
Let's keep moving. We got a lot of questions. I think I might say some of them for the end based off.
Okay. Okay.
I appreciate.
Okay. Great. So again, I just like to sort of carry us along for the ride here. So we've talked about partnership, right, and the importance of understanding our role. And now we're doing discovery. Well, now if I do get the chance to do the discovery, guess where the onus is? It's now on me to do something with this newfound information and insight, which is to say, now I should be able to create a very bespoke, customized demo that shows them exactly how we can support what it is that they're going to try to do, right, or what they're trying to do. So as a result, we now have the opportunity to prepare for a demo, right? Here's the challenge that I discovered, and the problem that I discovered I was making was that I would get this idea in my mind that was enormous, that I could build this and I could build that. And by the way, what are we? We're engineers, right? Like we love to build and tinker and solve problems, right? So I found that I was building sort of almost a solution and a quote demo that probably would take hours to fully go through, right? When really I just had a 30-minute, demo, right? And we only had a 45-minute meeting. And so what happened? First of all, I was starting to burn myself out. Second, I was frankly spending too much time preparing for demos. And third, I was going in, if we build it, what do we want to do? Show it. So I was going in determined to show all these things that I had built, whether it was necessary or not. So what I discovered is that I really need to balance efficiency with effectiveness on preparing for a demo. The other thing that I realized is I was focusing too much on what I was building. I was focusing too much on the solution, the product, the widget, right? And not enough on their situation, what they were trying to do. And I realized that there's a big difference between demo content and the demo story. So hence habit 3, prepare, was born. And what I like to talk about is the difference between the demo content, right? The thing versus the script or the story, right? It's really the difference between what we're showing versus what it is that we're going to say, how, and when. Prepare content is necessary. I have no issue with that, right? Prepare custom content. Let's just make sure we focus more on the story and less on the content, and just prepare with the demo in mind. If you know it's a 45-minute meeting or a 1-hour meeting, you're probably going to have about 20 minutes by the time the salesperson does a few slides and you leave some room, and you want to leave room for questions, right? We really need to prepare with that in mind. Clearly, under preparation is a mistake. I think over preparation is a mistake as well. And let's just remember, it's not about us, folks. As much as we love it to be, and as much as we want it to be, it's not about us. It's not about our smarts, right? It's really about their needs and what they're trying to accomplish. And it's really what the story needs to focus on. So with that, James, again, as we've sort of done, you know, kind of through the first 3 habits here, is let's talk about what this means now. I think we are all faced with a major time management challenge. And I talk to a lot of people, we're in one camp or the other. Either we're busier than we've ever been, and as such, honestly, we need to pace ourselves, right? I think, James, it was even you who said that the new work week is yesterday, today, and tomorrow, right? Like, I don't even know when the weekends are. I think there are other people that have more time on their hands. And as such, we also need to use that time effectively and take advantage of it. So again, James, I'll just stop sharing for a moment so we can sort of converse. But any thoughts come to mind, or any questions from you or the audience on this?
Yeah, no, I glad you brought up the yesterday, today, tomorrow, because I saw that somewhere and I think it really applies. We've actually had a lot of questions around over preparation, but I think that you nailed that one really well. And I think you talk about the time management. From my perspective, you've really covered prepare a lot. I just want to make a comment, you know, regardless of the current state, I think I agree with you that I see a lot of times as we build a solution that we love, we like to demo our favorite part of our product. It's like our favorite thing, but it means nothing to the customer. And so over preparation happens a lot, and you're in that call and it's taking you a certain way, but you want to get to your talk track. In my experience, and I've done it before myself, I always know when I want to go to my place, but the meeting's taking me elsewhere, and it's not a place that matches both parties. You're right. It's all about the customer. And so, yeah, thank you for going through preparedness pretty well.
Well, and we have to fight that. We have to resist that urge, right? We're literally in a demo and we can tell they're going over here. Like, wait a minute, you haven't seen like the best thing, you know, but maybe they may not care. I mean, it's interesting. And I think you may have even seen this post. I think I posted it either today or yesterday. One of my favorite sayings, he or she who buys a shovel doesn't want a shovel. They want a hole. But they don't just want a hole, they want a fence, or they want a tree. But they don't want a fence or a tree. They want privacy or shade or fruit or flowers, right? But we are so in love with our shiny shovels, right? We just want to stick our shovels in people's faces, right? So we just have to flip, you know, the narrative, right? So, all right. Any additional thoughts, or shall we continue down the path here?
I think we're down some exciting ones now that people are really interested in hearing about.
Okay, great. So it's interesting. It's interesting, James, and you and I have had a chance. You know, we've had a chance to talk about this quite a bit. In fact, you know, just yesterday I was saying to you, we've actually, up until today, we've actually followed the habits pretty well, right? It was, you know, we've developed a partnership, getting to know each other well, right? Building some trust. Yeah. You know, I did a lot. It was more me probing with you, but I think you did a little trying to better understand me. And certainly I was trying to probe, like, what are you trying to accomplish? What does all this mean, right? Certainly we prepared. And then the thing that we've done in the past, certainly 24 hours, is we've practiced. Yeah. And here's what I discovered, folks, is that, and in fact, I'll share the screen again because this is one of my favorite moments in all of my workshops. And anybody who knows me knows the answer to this question. What's the one thing we don't want after a click? And James, you might not know the answer to this. I don't know. Do you know what my favorite word here?
I'm excited to see it, but we have a couple where people have responded with a surprise. Is that correct?
A surprise. The one thing that I don't want after a click is a surprise. When I click, I want to know exactly what's coming next, and what I expect to come next is in fact what happens, right? And here's what I discovered. And look, by the way, folks, stuff happens in demos. We all know that, right? Things, stuff goes wrong, and sometimes it's outside of our control. The thing that bothered me the most was that I would do discovery, and then I would prepare, and I'd have everything set, and then we'd get in front of the customer, and I'd click, and something would go wrong, and I'd be like, "What happened?" And then after the fact, I'd realize that there was it was a 5-second change. Like it was just one configuration that I didn't set, or there was one piece of data that was missing, and all I had to do was do one thing, and it would have worked flawlessly, right? Had I just that morning or the night before do what I call click every click. Had I just gone through and clicked every click to make sure everything was working, that wouldn't have happened. Now, do those moments kill deals? I don't think they do. By and large, I think most people were taught, particularly if we're developing the relationship and we're sort of answering the mail in other regards. We've done all the other things. I don't think one slip up is going to kill a deal. But if you're anything like me, and frankly, I having worked with James, for a month, I know he's like me. Like I want things to go as flawless as possible, right? And the one thing I just tell people is just leave enough time to practice. It's honestly look, in this role, we tend to run fast, right? And it's a lot of times a scramble to get ready for a meeting or a presentation or a demo. The first thing that falls off the plate is practice. And I'm just going to say, please don't do that to yourself. Leave time to practice. Leave nothing to chance, right? Again, the worst thing that can happen after a click is a surprise. Just practice your demo or your slides on the right version, on the right platform, with the right set of data, using the right, laptop, et cetera. And so how does this apply to today? Well, there's probably a number of ways where it applies today, but more than anything, folks, and this is the only place where I'm going to get even a little bit assertive, is there is simply no excuse for not knowing how to use our video conference platforms right now. And look, I'm the first one to raise my hand, whether it was learning WebEx years ago, or the first time I started working with Teams, or the first time I started working with GoTo, I've sort of cut my teeth on Zoom. I'm actually trying 8x8 now, which I like. I'm going to encourage all of you, become the de facto expert in whatever video conferencing platform your company uses, and don't let issues with the video. Now, granted, I think everybody's a little bit more sort of kind of forgiving and lenient right now. Let's not let something like not knowing how to share or manage the video conferencing, platform get in the way of a well-executed presentation and demonstration. So again, James, I'll go ahead and stop the sharing and just invite any questions that you have, or any that maybe you got from the audience.
Yeah, we have a couple really good questions. One I do want to call out. I think we talked about this. I was talking about the 5 Ps, the proper practice prevents poor performance, right? And we were saying like practice is so obvious, like why do we not do it? And actually a really good question came in that says, is the expectation to practice for each disco demo, even if sometimes you demo the same thing and become audible ready?
I'm gonna repeat the question to make sure I understand it. So the question is it necessary to practice before every, you said disco and demo?
Yeah, so I would say the assumption would be if you've done something time and time again, should you be practicing it? Should you go into it? I think I know where you're going to go with this, but that's
yeah. No, and I think it's a valid question, and here's why, because I'm inclined to say with all the habits and with everything that I say, are there exceptions? The answer is yes, of course there are exceptions, right? And are there certain situations where the answer is, well, it depends? Of course it depends, right? And yes, if it's a standard canned demo and you're pretty much doing the same demo every time and you're running it sort of on your laptop or in your, in your environment and nobody else is touching it and nothing has changed, and you could do it in your sleep, then no, there's probably not a need to practice every time. So what I'm really talking about particularly is if you've done discovery and as a result you created a bespoke demo and a customized demo, right? And then you're going in to maybe do some things with data you've not used before, screens you've not used before, et cetera. That's when I test. But there's one other comment that I'm going to make on this one. And I've seen this happen a lot. By the way, it applies to slides as well as demo. When you're presenting something to the customer, if they see it, it's fair game. If they see it in a slide, they may ask about it. If they see a button or something in the platform, you may get a question about it. So you better be prepared. Like everything that they may see and ask about, you better be prepared to either click into with confidence or have an answer to. So beware what you show. It's fair game. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I have some thoughts too, but I think from a timing perspective, I want to, as a true AE on this call, I want to make sure we're staying track to the time. So I think we should move to our next Mentimeter question before we get into our last two and actually continue this dialogue a little bit on there.
I think that's great. So everybody, what we're going to do is we're going to go into the next question. Notice that the code has changed. So you'll have to go back to menti.com and enter in the code 266560. And to set some context here, so we started with talking about the foundation, the partnership, and then we talked through habits 2, 3, and 4. The question that I have, the question that we have, and I'm very interested, and it seems like it's coming about what I expected. It started, is which one would you sort of prioritize in terms of importance? Preparation, discovery, or practice? So interesting. I feel like we're watching a bit of a horse race here. I mean,
I really am a fan of this Mentimeter and how it goes. You know, Chris, going back, I did want to add one thing to the comment about practice. Look, you may have done a demo 100 times. I actually have a philosophy that the more you've done a demo, the sloppier you might get. And actually there's like a path where you've done the demo so many times that you start to cut corners and you start to talk about your favorite things. And it just becomes habit and it's natural. But I would say the one thing you can do in terms of practice is find 2, 3, 4 value statements that you want to add that like into that demo that you've done 100 times in a row. Just make sure there's a couple value statements that you've heard from discovery, you've read in the CRM notes, you were told walking down the hallway or over the Zoom chat. Those types of things will allow you to practice, even though you've done the same demo time and time and time again. Those value statements are critical.
I love what you're saying. And by the way, it's not, and I think this is the point you're making, it's not just, practice is not just the clicks. And I know in my habit, I say click every click, but it is also what words are you using, right? How are you positioning the capabilities, right? And what are those value statements that you're using? So, hey, well, I think that's a pretty good sample size. So we got 60 responses. it's interesting. Probe and prepare kind of flip-flopped a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm of the opinion, and I agree with apparently most of our audience, that I've always thought that the most important thing is the discovery, and that, you know, even if I don't get a chance to prepare or practice as much, if I had to pick one, it would be that discovery, because we can sort of shift on the fly.
Yeah,
So,
and I think after this, we'll talk about key takeaways, but love to continue this discussion on the discussion boards on the website, right? We can
absolutely.
This data.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Okay, so I'm looking at the time. I know we've got the landing gear out. We're, you know, the runway's in sight. So let's go ahead and you know, bring this home. So, you know, regardless of how well, you know, we're managing the relationship and how effective the relationship is with our sales counterparts, no matter how well we do discovery and preparation and practice, at some point the spotlight is on us. And in that moment, we need to be able to perform. And what I discovered along my journey is that, frankly, pre-sales conversations are just different than post-sales conversations. And there's just certain things that we need to do in the context of a sales presentation or a sales demonstration in order to get the technical win. And that's really what habit number 5, perform, is all about. It's really the set of demo best practices that get us to the technical win. And James, I mean, you know this, we could spend probably 2 hours, you know, talking about these, but I just sort of cherry picked a few of the key ones. Know the players, know who's in the room, know where the decision makers are, and the key technical principles. Set expectations up front. Make sure that you've set some boundaries around the, you know, what's kind of on topic for the meeting. Begin with the end. I mentioned Peter Cohan. Brian Gary is another author in our space, and he refers to this as making the James Bond entry, right? And know your aha moments. There should be 3 or 4, maybe 5 sort of aha moments where you're hoping that you're going to click into something and you're going to get a reaction from the audience. I love pause for effect rather. One of the things that we do is we get to that aha moment and then we blow through it, and we haven't given it a chance to sort of sink in, right? One that I'm guilty of: explain, but don't over-explain. Fortunately, on a webinar, I know that I'm time-bound, so I'm less likely to over-explain. Expect and know how to answer questions. Again, I think even early in my, you know, profession or career as a sales engineer, sometimes I was rattled or even, you know, taken aback by questions. You should go into a meeting wanting questions. Nobody's ever bought anything without asking a fair amount of questions up front. Always be seeking feedback. And one of my favorite sayings, a confused mind always says no. So with that, again, let's turn our attention to today. And here's the irony. Habit number 5 is to perform. And that might give the you know, kind of appearance or the perception that we need to be somebody else, that we need to be acting on stage. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. And in fact, I think more than ever before, we need to be authentic. Again, we're all going through this together. Everyone's working from home. Our personal lives have been turned upside down. Our professional lives have been turned upside down. Are there certain things that we still need to do in the context of a sales conversation? Absolutely. But more than ever, we just need to be ourselves. So again, James, I'll go ahead and pause there. I think you have some thoughts or maybe a question on that one.
Yeah, we have a couple questions on this, and I think it kind of goes to what I mentioned earlier around sensitivity around current climate right now.
Yeah.
You know, the opportunities that many of us are actually getting to get in front of customers are starting to get fewer and fewer, right? And so I think there's a bit more pressure on people to actually perform and make the most of the time they get with the customers. So do you have any like quick tips or tricks on, you know, what people should be doing in this time when they need to perform and don't have many opportunities anymore?
I do, actually. The one that comes to mind the most is, I can guarantee you that if you get onto into a phone call, we talk about being trusted advisors. if you have 30 minutes or 60 minutes with a customer for anything, whether it's discovery or a presentation or a demonstration, and that was the best 30 minutes of the day, or that was the best 60 minutes of their day, because they walked away with a new piece of information, or they walked away with a new sense of encouragement, either about your solution or something else. Do you think they're likely to have another, do you think they're likely to take another meeting with you? I bet they will be. So that's my message, is make every meeting worth their time. Make every meeting, have them walking away from that meeting go, wow, I can't wait till I have a chance to talk with James again. That was really good. So that's my answer.
That's perfect. It really is. That's great. I think that actually perfect rolls into the last one unintentionally.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, and before I bring up the screen again, this is an interesting one. So, to bury the lead there, habit number 6 is to perfect our trade, perfect our craft, perfect our demo. And it's really the pursuit of mastery. And again, folks, where did this come from? In fact, I'll give a shout out to my first manager, a gentleman named Jim Lee. He, in the early part of my career, he would say, Chris, if ever I was in a demonstration and somebody asked me a question that I couldn't answer or the tool couldn't answer, I would make it my business to figure out, after the fact, to figure out how can I answer that question the next time I'm asked, or how can I do something, build some workaround in the platform to show a solution for that or give a good answer to that. And this has really evolved even further for me. It's really the continuous improvement loop with our sales counterparts. In fact, one of the parts that I love about this job the most is the debrief after the meetings, right? Whether it's driving home in the car, which none of us are doing right now, or just after a web presentation, not unlike this, where we kind of talk about, what worked, what didn't, what could we have done differently, right? It's really sort of the opportunity and the habit, right, of accepting we're not ever going to be perfect, right? And we can always learn something more. We can always learn from any engagement or any conversation. So that's really where habit 6 evolved from. And it's really just the principle of constant and consistent improvement. Every demo is an opportunity, or every sales opportunity or conversation is an opportunity to learn and improve. We can learn from our wins, we can learn from our losses, and we can learn from our no decisions, right? And again, I would encourage people, create a cadence or a feedback loop with your sales counterparts. That's one of the best ways to build that relationship. And again, it requires a solid partnership, and frankly, will help build that partnership. So again, I'll go ahead and pause or stop the sharing. I know we're very much nearing the end. Any closing thoughts on that particular one?
Yeah. I think at least just quickly, this is a very good one that I feel like in our careers, many of us don't necessarily take the time, energy, and effort to put into. We kind of move right on to the next call, the next meeting. Anyone who's ever worked for me knows how much I love and stress feedback, and feedback is a hard thing to give. It's a hard thing to receive. You have to be open in both ways. Do you maybe have a quick, quick advice or a thought on how, we can solicit feedback from our AEs, our sales managers, our SE managers, so that we know that we're growing and improving, because that's what it's all about, right?
Yeah, well, and I think it's twofold, right? First of all, I mean, this is going to sound almost trite and too simple, but just ask, right? I mean, ask your sales counterpart, ask your colleagues. But I think it's more than just asking. It's being open to that feedback. And I can't stress this enough, folks. We just, look, we're all technical. We're all experts. We're good at what we do. Let's work hard to leave our ego at the door and sincerely seek that feedback, right, in the interest of being better, right? That's my advice on that one.
Oh, that's perfect. And I think I would love to take another 30 to 60 minutes of your time and ask you a lot of these questions, but we want to be good with time. So I want to say thanks, Chris. This was great. It was really fun going through the 6 habits with you. We've got a lot of good questions, a lot of good feedback. Really nice. So we want to ask one question before everybody goes in terms of feedback. If you don't mind just going to Menti and answering how would you rate your proficiency in these 6 habits, I think it would be really awesome for us to kind of see what our audience thinks and how they fit in each one. Again, we'll pass this data and this information out as well. And again, in spirit of asking for feedback, I'm also going to launch a poll through Zoom asking you how we did today. And then will we see you on next week's webinar? And while we do that, Chris, this was fun. I really appreciate the time, appreciate the energy and the practice going to this. This was great.
Thank you, James. As you well know, and certainly anybody who's heard me speak before, or anybody who's sat through this, I'm passionate about this, love talking about it. And, you know, for those of you who are out in the field, you have all my respect, and, you know, continue to fight the good fight, as they say. You know, we're all in this together. And I do think that, and this is why I love the PreSales Collective. We understand one another, right? And we are kind of a unique breed. So the fact that you've created this environment for us to collaborate more is just fabulous. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Chris. And I would say if Menti is still going to go up, I do want to ask for 30 seconds more of everybody's time in terms of what's kind of coming next. We have moved from an idea of having webinars every month to having webinars every week over April and May. We have a fantastic lineup set up. If you go to the PreSales Collective and go to the webinars and RSVP, next week is with Rob Falcone. You might know him from his book, Just Effing Demo. We're going to be talking about some things, great demos, Paul Pierce, and then a diversity and inclusion panel with a number of individuals rounding out the end of April. Within the next week or two, we're going to announce our weekly webinar series for May. And we really hope that you can embrace the community, embrace the culture that we're trying to build collectively as a group. And also, I want to highlight the discussion boards, because the discussion boards are a place that have been fairly active. I know a lot of people have Slack, but we want to make this a place where you can ask questions, bring up topics, get advice. It's really been neat. It's been great to see the questions and the activity on here. So I'd suggest if you have questions today that weren't answered, please bring them to the discussion board and we'll continue the conversation. Otherwise, thank you all for your feedback. Thank you all for your time. We hope to see you next week. If not, we'll see you the week after.
And hey, James, before we break, I do want to just do a call out to Demo Flow. So Demo Flow, if you guys aren't familiar, Demo Flow is one of the new vendors in the space. They were the sponsor for today's session. And if you've wondered, how is it that Chris is seamlessly flowing from slide to website to Mentimeter, back to slide, the entire presentation has been done in the Demo Flow platform. So if you've not met those guys or talked to those guys, I would encourage you to do so.
Yeah, thanks, Larson, Sarah. It's been awesome getting to know Larson throughout this process as well. I'm excited for where pre-sales technology is going, for sure. It's great. All right, everybody. Thanks for your time. Right on time. Have a good day. Good luck at the rest of your meetings and calls. Bye-bye.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.